Cute.
I think I put the clicker up there. So thank you guys so much for letting me come and just being willing to have me come and talk about mental health. Since I am talking about mental health and some things that can kind of go along with mental health, just wanted to kind of put out just a warning that sometimes some of the content might be a little bit difficult. So if at any point there's just some subject matter that you aren't wanting to hear, that is okay. If you need to take care of yourself and walk out, go to the restroom, whatever you might need to do. Because one of the topics that I am going to talk about is suicide prevention. And so sometimes depending on how you've been impacted by mental health or how you've been impacted by suicide in your environment, it can be a little bit difficult sometimes. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there so that you guys were aware. But we're going to be talking about mental health because it is a conversation that not a lot of people talk about. And since we are in a kind of a Christian school setting, I'm assuming that a lot of you guys might be plugged into various local churches or faith communities. And so I wanted to ask you guys, when someone has a physical health issue, what does your faith community do? Take them a casserole. Yeah, you cook them a casserole. Yeah,
So
what
true.
else might you do if someone's having a physical health issue?
Pray for them.
You pray for them. Any other thoughts?
You just help.
Yeah.
If they're on crutches,
Yeah.
you hold the door. If they're on, you
You
just
find
help, offer
small
help.
ways to help them, absolutely. With whatever their difficulty is, you try to find a small way to help them. You might be calling them and checking on them more often. But when someone has a mental health challenge or a mental health crisis, what do we see our communities do?
Look the other way.
We ignore them, we look the other way. We don't call and check on them. We definitely don't make them some casseroles.
You tell them
So
to pray more.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and
So
so
true.
what we end up doing, and a lot of times it's not because we don't want to help. Sometimes it's because maybe we don't know how to help, or maybe we're worried about making something worse instead of being helpful. And so there could be all kinds of different reasons why we're not engaging with that individual who's experiencing a mental health challenge. And so whatever those reasons are, our hope is that as a community that we really start treating mental health very similar to how we treat physical health, and that we are engaging, reaching out to those individuals, helping where we can, praying for them. And so we're going to talk about mental health today. And so to kind of illustrate, I wanted to share this video with y'all. This is from, it is a secular agency, but they are an agency that does a lot of educational information for families. So if you ever need resources on talking about mental health, access to mental health, this is a good place that you can go.
All right, this is one-on-one, take one, Mark.
Why don't you guys go ahead and just find your seat on the couch. So, what do you do to be healthy?
I like to dance. My favorite would be lacrosse. I play tag. I love carrots. I also like cucumbers. Eat a lot of fruit and vegetables and mac and cheese.
What are some of your least favorite healthy foods?
Beans. My least favorite is cauliflower.
Have you ever had cauliflower?
When your child is sick, take us through the things that you do to help them get well.
When he's not feeling well, I take the hand and I put it on his forehead.
And if she has a fever, we'll give her fever-reducing meds.
You want to make sure you're taking them to the doctor just to make sure they're safe.
So, what do you do to feel happy?
I don't know. That's a hard question to answer.
Can you describe what it feels like when you're sad or when you're having a bad day?
I get mad easily. I don't know, I just don't want to be doing anything, just lay in my bed and be by myself. Whenever I'm nervous, a thunderstorm is going on in my head. I feel tired and very sad on the inside, like they just want to... That's something, a word I can't describe.
Right.
As parents, when it comes to mental health, do you ever feel overwhelmed?
Yeah, I do get overwhelmed because I'm not sure quite what to do. I mean, children don't come with instruction manuals, right?
Am I doing the right thing? Am I limited to what I was provided with as a child?
I mean, I'm being honest, I cry about it. I'm trying to find the right words and trying to reach her because it seems like it's getting harder to do that.
A lot of times I feel like as a mother I'm supposed to have it all figured out.
You know what to do if they have a fever, you know what to do if they have a broken bone, and you see them struggling emotionally, and you're like, where do I go? What do I do?
We're in a time where it's affecting kids younger and younger. I do wish that I had more tools. You're gonna find tons of things on the internet, but you want it to be from a trusted source.
I felt very overwhelmed. I felt very guilty. I felt like everything that I wanted to provide for her, I wasn't gonna be able to do. And it scared me because she's my entire life. What do you do? What do you do?
We need help.
We need help. Yes, we need help. We need help.
Most childhood health resources focus on physical well-being, but that's only half the story. What about our kids' mental health?
These days, life is not getting easier for kids. Help them understand that there's nothing out there that cannot be solved. There's always a solution.
I really hope that as she grows, that she still keeps that light and keeps that energy, because she's really gonna be something great in this world.
We provide free, expert-developed resources to millions across the United States. Don't wait for a concern or crisis. Early action can be life-changing. Together, we have the power to reshape our children's future. Join our community at kidsmentalhealthfoundation.org.
So let me ask you guys a question. Did anything in that video resonate with you as either a parent, a teacher, a friend? Did anything kind of resonate with you? And if so, do you feel comfortable sharing? No, that's okay.
I just think that it's interesting that kids can't explain what makes them happy or what makes them, that's, I think that's important to be able to, I just think that's, none of them did, I don't think. Did they? Any of them say?
And that's something that's really hard for a young person to do. For one, to even realize what they're feeling.
Really,
and then
yes.
put words to describe how they're feeling, and then to communicate that to the trusted adults in their lives. I'm sorry, I think I may have interrupted you though.
I was just saying, I was shocked that they could describe what happy felt like.
And it is really hard for kids to express their feelings. And a lot of times, sometimes they are feeling something, they don't even realize they're feeling it. Sometimes it might come across as a physical symptom. I don't know if I've ever had a young person say, oh, my stomach's hurting, or oh, my head is hurting. When really maybe you've taken them to the doctor and the doctor's like, there's nothing wrong with them in terms of physical health. But sometimes our emotional health, our mental health, some stressors that we're having at school or in our friend groups, it can make us have physical symptoms. And a lot of that's due to our inability to identify what we're really experiencing and share that with some trusted adults in our lives. So the thing that resonated with me as a parent, because I'm a parent of two young people myself, is that the parents sometimes feel helpless. They're like, I don't know what to do to help my young person. Mental health has changed over the generations, and I don't know about y'all's community, but in Robertson County in general, we have a lot of grandparents who are raising young people due to whatever reason that's occurred. And so even the grandparents' knowledge of mental health now raising their grandkids, there's a huge gap in terms of knowledge and tools that they may have in their tool belt. So when we talk about mental health, because sometimes the words can be a little bit confusing because people use interchangeable words. When we talk about mental health, I'm really referring to this really broad category. So I'm talking about our mental health, that's one part of the category, and that's really referring to our ability to think clearly and make good decisions. So it's really focusing on our brain and how our brain is working. And for young people, do you guys know at what age the brain is fully developed?
25.
It is 25 years old. Do you know what part develops at towards the very end? Yes, which is involved in what?
Critical thinking.
Yes, making good decisions.
Making good decisions.
Absolutely. And so, yes, and so I will say, if you guys have ever been to an adverse childhood experiences, it really talks about brain development and how early things can impact our brain development. But this is one of the reasons why children might struggle to identify what they're feeling and to problem solve different situations that they may encounter, because their brain hasn't fully developed in that capacity. So depending on the age, but yeah, 25 is when resources is fully developed. And so when I talk about mental health, like I said, it includes mental health, but then we're also talking about emotional health. And so emotional health refers to our ability to cope with and manage our emotions. So the ups and downs that we might experience, and a lot of times with young people that can look like this on a daily basis. And so that's when we're talking about emotional health, we're really referring to the young person's ability to cope with whatever stressors they might be encountering in that moment and to control their emotions. But we also talk about behavioral health. And so this refers to behaviors and habits that can affect our overall well-being. For example, getting good sleep. How many of the children you know in your world are getting 8 hours of sleep? When's the last time you guys got 8 hours of sleep? Very rare, but sleep can really impact our mental and emotional health and our behavioral health. But that's a habit, so that's an example of a behavioral habit. Also, using alcohol or drugs. That's a behavior that can also impact our overall well-being. And so it's just something to be mindful of. When people talk about behavioral health, they're really talking about the different choices that we make that can impact our overall health and emotions and our chemistry inside. But then since we're in a Christian community, I also want to talk about spiritual health and how that can really impact our well-being as well. If we are in spiritual health, since we're in a Christian system, it's really referring to our beliefs and living in accordance with our biblical values and living those out. And so when we are not following through, like if we have a certain belief system and maybe we're acting outside of that belief system, that can really disrupt our well-being. It can disrupt our health. And so just to be mindful of that. And so let's talk about a mental health continuum. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure it all gets up there. So mental health is a continuum. So some days our health we're feeling really great. We are on the well end, but that doesn't mean that some days we don't always go to the other end where we're really unwell. And maybe we're at a point where we might need some professional assistance to help us with our mental health. And so when we look at mental health on a continuum, it really helps us to identify the resources that would be best to meet someone where they're at individually. And so that's why it's really important to know when someone has good mental health is when maybe they're able to live, laugh, love, and learn. I like using the 4 L's because they are able to thrive in whatever setting they are put in. Doesn't mean that they're making straight A's, but it means that they are able to learn in the environment that they are doing. And so good mental health, someone can have good mental health even if they have a diagnosable mental health disorder. Because what that means is even though they have a mental health diagnosis, they have recognized the things that are contributing to good mental health. They are implementing those things in their life, and they've reached a point of stability where despite whatever mental health diagnosis they may be experiencing, they're able to live, laugh, love, and learn. They're able to thrive. But it's also possible to not have a mental health diagnosis and still have very poor mental health. For example, I don't drink, but if I did drink and maybe I drank a lot, that can contribute to very poor mental health because alcohol is a natural depressant. And so just being mindful of how, even if I don't have a mental health diagnosis, there's something that I could be doing that could still contribute to me having very poor mental health. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So I want to talk about some signs and symptoms that a young person might be experiencing a mental health challenge. So these are things that you as caring adults could be looking for in the young people that you are around. How many of you guys, just so I can get a kind of understand, how many of you guys are parents to someone at the school? Okay. How many of you guys are educators? Maybe educators. So we got one educator, okay. So it just kind of helps me kind of know of our people. But some things that you can be looking for, some signs and symptoms that someone might be experiencing a mental health challenge. And just to kind of help you in case you're wanting to know what the difference is. So a sign is something that you see. For example, if you were driving, we might see a stop sign on our route going somewhere. So that stop sign is something that I can see. But for example, I may not know what the stop sign means. If I was maybe from another country that didn't utilize stop signs and I came over here and saw a stop sign, I might see it, but I don't always know what it means. And that's where we talk about education, training. That's what it's helping people understand the signs, helping them, when they see them, recognize what those signs are for. A symptom is what someone is experiencing. So unless the young person tells me, I don't know what that symptom might be. Unless they tell me that their stomach's hurting, unless they tell me that their head's hurting, I don't know that they're experiencing that unless they have communicated that to me. But some signs and symptoms that someone might be experiencing a mental health challenge is difficulty with concentration. How many of your own people probably have difficulty with concentration, especially this time of year? Oh, bless you, teacher.
Yes.
Because I can only imagine you have a whole classroom full of them. So when I talk about signs and symptoms, it doesn't mean that if someone is experiencing this sign and symptom, oh, they have a mental health challenge. There could be lots of different things going on. It could be that they didn't get enough sleep. It could be that maybe they have a family member who's been deployed. It could be lots of different things that it's encountering. And so that's why it's really important just that we recognize it, and then we use kind of our noticing skills to kind of determine if this is something that is just a situational thing, or if it's something that's lasting a little bit longer, whether or not they might need a little bit more help. Changes to appetite, changes to sleep patterns, their inability to complete school tasks, having excessive worries, that's another sign. If they are feeling sad, empty, hopeless, or worthless. Sensitivity to even any of the 5 senses, and that's something that can go unnoticed at times. But when someone is experiencing some mental health challenges, they are more sensitive to different things. They might be more sensitive to lights, very similar to someone maybe who is on the autism spectrum, and when they have some sensitivity issues, just be recognizing that when someone is experiencing a mental health challenge, they might be more sensitive than they are when they're at a calm place. So just be mindful of that. They also might have increased irritability or restlessness. And I will say with males, typically the first sign that I might look for in a male that might be experiencing depression is actually irritability. In the female population, we might see a lot of people, they might cry and express their feelings more, but in the male population, it can be irritability. But also, guess what? Teenagers are just irritable sometimes. So just because they're irritable, it doesn't mean that they have a mental health challenge. And that's where it takes you as the caring adult in their life to kind of take these bits of information, and you knowing the young person in your life, knowing whether or not this is something I need to ask a little bit more questions about, and get a little bit more help involved. They might also withdraw from various interests. They also might have just a decline in overall performance. Sudden changes in their personality, unexplainable changes in their thoughts or speech or in their writing. And these last 3, I'm gonna put them up on the next slide. So if you have a young person in your life that is experiencing paranoia, and that might be like, they might be worried that everyone's out to get them, or they might be worried that nobody likes them, although that could be a real fear too. Like if someone is in a situation where they've been bullied, and they're encountering bullying, that could be a real fear. So knowing kind of the young person and helping determine what's going on in their environment will help you know if this is something that is more of a mental health challenge, or if this is more of a situation that we need to address with the environment, and removing or doing something about the bullying behavior. If they're hearing things or seeing things that no one else can see or hear, that's an indication of something that's a greater risk factor. Or if they have thoughts of wanting to kill oneself or kill others, that's another greater risk. So if they have these 3 warning signs, or signs or symptoms, this is where we really need to go ahead and get the professionals involved. Go ahead and get out, get connected with a mental health counselor, someone in their life that can help them with that. And so just so you all know, have any of y'all ever heard of 988? No? Some of you have? Yes, yay. Well, I brought some magnets that you guys are welcome to take home with you, or you're welcome to take as many as you want to the school if they would like. But 988 is a 24/7 crisis line. So if I am experiencing thoughts of suicide, I can call 988 24/7. I can chat them, I can text them to get help, and to get help immediately. And so if I call, text, or chat 988, I'm connected with a mental health professional right away. It's also got services available in Spanish, as well as for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. So just know those are things that don't let that deter them from reaching out if that is something that would impact them. But it's also something, if you have a young person in your life, so maybe you're not the one experiencing thoughts of suicide, but maybe you've encountered a young person and you're really worried that they might be having, you can still call 988, and they will give you tools and resources that can help you speak into that young person's life in that moment to make sure that they are safe for now. So I want to talk about creating a safe environment to talk about mental health. Growing up, did you guys feel that it was a safe environment for you to talk about mental health? No. What kind of things did you encounter and did you notice in your various spheres in schools when people talked about mental health? It would make it unsafe.
People even talking about it much.
Yeah, they just don't even talk about it.
Yeah, I just
You're
don't think
right.
anybody really.
Yes.
Or you were weird if you talked about. Yeah, it would be like you.
You know, I just remember thinking about people that had mental health growing up, people in the wards and, you know, that couldn't be, I mean, nobody could deal with them or whatever, so it was like a scary thing.
Absolutely. And that is what a lot of the general public do believe. Like, you know, they just feel like mental health is just a really scary topic, a really overwhelming topic. And so because that is our general thoughts, and like a lot of us, we don't talk about it. Even though maybe if it's our own mental health and we really want to talk to someone about it, we sometimes don't because we're worried about what other people will think of us. We're worried about how other people will treat us. We're worried about, especially young people, they might be worried about being bullied for whatever mental health issue they might be going through. So just being mindful of, even though we've come a long ways, there's still a very big stigma when it comes to mental health. And so our job is to hopefully reduce the stigma so that we can create a safe environment for people to talk about mental health. And so one of the things that we can do is we can really start to examine ourselves. Because that's where everything that we do really should start with examining ourselves and how we are doing. And one of those things is examining our own attitude towards mental health. Have you guys seen any negative attitudes towards mental health? Anybody want to share what a negative attitude that you've seen towards a mental health before? So I'll give you an example. So a negative attitude could be a parent telling their kid, oh, just pick yourself up off the ground, just push on through, that shouldn't be bothering you. Or you're such a wuss, you know, sorry for the language, but no, it could be worse. But, you know, saying things like that, talking down to people for the emotions that they are experiencing does not create a safe environment for a young person to open up and share their feelings and share what they're going through. So recognizing what our attitude is towards mental health. If our attitude towards mental health is one that is negative or like condemning, or that you're worthless or you're not good enough because you're having these struggles, that's going to be communicated to other people around us, and that's going to contribute to an unhealthy environment for other people to share whatever mental health challenge they might be going through. So just recognizing our own attitude and doing that personal work towards getting to a place where, hey, health is health. Just like I have physical health, my mental health is just as important as my physical health, and it deserves to be talked about. It deserves to be taken care of. So just being mindful of that. And also just being mindful of how words matter. And I actually made the mistake of it earlier today. I don't know if Nadia caught it, but I was like, man, I had an insane week this week. I just used the word insane. And I use it to describe a very chaotic week. And that was even me being a mental health professional with like 20 years under my belt, I still go back to some of my old habits and use words that are not very positive or at least healthy when I'm talking about mental health. So for example, I try to get rid of the word crazy out of my vocabulary. I try to get rid of the word insane, but you know, it creeps back in there every now and then. And when I talk about suicide too, it's really important that I examine the word choice that I use for the word suicide. Because for example, how many of you guys, when you hear people talk about suicide, what's the word that you usually hear them say? They did what? Killed themselves, okay. So that's actually healthy. Have you a healthy word choice? Have you heard anything else that they ever? A lot of times people say, oh, well, they committed suicide. So have y'all ever heard that word before? Someone's committed suicide? When you hear the word committed, does it give you a happy connotation or a negative one? Kind of negative, yeah, because what else do people commit?
Crimes.
Yeah, they commit crimes. They also commit, in a faith community, we talk about committing sins. So there's lots of different things that people commit that have a negative connotation. And so we really want to be mindful of removing that wordage, because if we already put that negative language on a subject matter, if a young person is having thoughts of suicide, they're not going to want to open up to us about what they're experiencing, because they already feel like we're condemning them in some way for having those thoughts. And so it's really important that we make sure that when we're talking about it, that we try to just say, die by suicide or killed self or others. And so another word, so that was one that had a negative spin on, but also I've heard completed suicide. Have you guys ever heard someone say they've completed suicide? Well, that's another word choice that actually is used a lot when we're talking about suicide. But what else do people complete? They complete degrees, they complete accomplishments. So that would be putting a positive spin on it either. And we really don't want to do that either. We want to really present it as a very neutral term that someone died by suicide. When we lost someone, maybe they had a heart attack, someone died by a heart attack. So just really classifying that the person, we always want to make sure that we're using person first language, which means that we're talking about the person first and then whatever their challenge or struggle might be. And so when we say someone died by suicide, we're really putting the person first and then describing how they died. So just being mindful of that. Modeling desired behaviors. This is hard because how many of us sometimes when we're interacting with our young people, we do the very thing that we're telling our young person not to do. I think we're all guilty of it. Yes, we do exactly what we're telling them not to do. So one of the things that we can do, if we're wanting to model desired behaviors, we need to model to the young people in our lives talking in a healthy way about our feelings. We need to model with them helping them resolve conflict in a healthy way. We need to model for them that it's okay to ask for help when our family is struggling. Because if we don't model that for them, when they start to struggle, they're not going to feel like it's okay to ask for help. When they start to experience difficult feelings, they're not going to feel like it's okay to talk about their feelings. And so just being mindful of, we really want to model the behavior that we want to see in our young people. And then manage our own reactions. How many of you, you can tell what you're thinking on your face? Anybody? You can read your face and know exactly what you're thinking. And so when we talk to young people, it's really important that we're mindful of how we are reacting, especially if they're coming to us with something very difficult for them to talk about. And if a young person were to come to us and talk to us about having thoughts of suicide in particular, that can create a whole lot of feelings in us. Like we might start feeling scared for their safety. We might start having all these worries bubble up in us that then come across on our face. And then that can communicate to them that, oh, we're really stressed, we don't know how to help you. And so it's really important that we try to manage any reactions that we might have so that we can present to the young person a very calm, cool, collected. It's okay if we're not on the inside, but we want to try to present that to them so that they know that we are someone that can help them in that moment. And then also just being mindful of your role and how you might help. So for example, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been doing mental health services for 20 years. But if someone in my family were experiencing a mental health challenge, I'm probably not going to have the ability to help them because I am now mom, sister, daughter, wife, whatever that role might be. I have a different relationship with that person. So I have to recognize when I'm not the best person to help and have to get someone else. So just recognizing your role in that young person's life and how it might impact you and your ability to help them. Any thoughts on that? All right, examining your environment. So just like I said, we got to focus on our own attitudes. We also need to examine the attitudes of the worlds that we're in. So whatever community you're in. So examining the environment of the school system that you're in, examining the environment of the faith community that you're in, examining the environment of any type of organization that you might be part of, how individuals are talking about mental health, how individuals are sharing about mental health, and seeing what you can do to create a positive change to help people talk about mental health in a more positive way and talk about mental health in a way that makes it okay to talk about it. Especially in your churches, there's lots of ways that you can do that because a lot of times people, when they are in a faith community, they do feel like they can't tell people when they are struggling. Even though that's the place where we want to be when we're struggling because that's where we get the most encouragement and the most lifted up. So just being mindful that we really do want to make sure that we are making sure that attitudes around us are being very positive and talking about mental health in a way that encourages people to reach out for help. And also just the environment itself. I would say, this is a very comfortable room. This is very nice. But just examining, so if I'm at a busy place where there's lots of different stimuli going on, that's probably not the best place for me to have a one-on-one conversation with someone about their mental health. If I'm in a crowded cafeteria, if I'm in a crowded gymnasium, that's probably not the best place for me to have a conversation with someone about their mental health. So just recognizing how your environment, the physical environment, can contribute to whether or not that's a safe place for you to have conversations with a young person about their mental health. Also just making sure that they have the accessibility to trusted adults. A lot of times we get into systems of just going through routines, and sometimes those routines, while they're great, structure is really important for young people. Sometimes we don't allow the flexibility for a young person to reach out to the trusted adult in their life. For example, maybe that trusted adult is their coach, but they only see their coach at a certain time of the day, and maybe they're having a mental health challenge in the morning and not around their coach. just being mindful if there's a trusted adult in a young person's life and a child is experiencing a mental health challenge, how can I get that trusted adult to that young person so that they can help them through that? And also just making sure that we're aware, when we're talking about mental health, that we're aware of confidentiality issues and mandatory reporting. So for confidentiality, it's really important that when a young person comes to you, that you are someone that they can trust, that you are someone that they know that whatever I tell you, that you're gonna keep this confidential. But for us as adults, that can be a little bit complicated because there are some things that we may not be able to keep confidential. For example, if I'm a mental health provider and I'm bound to confidentiality, but if I have someone sitting with me that's having thoughts of wanting to kill themselves, I have to reach out and get additional supports. I might have to tell a family member to help keep that person safe. And so just recognizing when confidentiality might have limits. And of course, if you're in a school setting, whatever protocols, procedures, or anything might be required for the school setting, just making sure you follow those as well. But it really is important to the best of our ability that we try to keep information confidential when a young person shares it with us, unless they are ever in danger to themselves or others, and that's when we kind of need to bring in some additional supports. But then also recognizing too, there might be other situations where we might have to break confidentiality. Have you ever heard of something called a mandatory reporter? So do you know at what age we become, everybody actually in this room is a mandatory reporter. Do you know at what age we become a mandatory reporter? It's 18. So a mandatory reporter is someone, if we either suspect child abuse or neglect, we're required to report that. So if we are working with a child or we're interacting with a child and they share with us that maybe they're being abused in their home, or they share with us that someone else in their home is being abused, even if it's an elderly person, elder abuse is also something. So we're mandatory reporters that when we suspect abuse or neglect, we have to report it. We don't have to investigate it, it's just that we suspect it. And there's ways that you can do that anonymously if needed as well. So just being mindful that your environment, there may be limits to your confidentiality with that young person. And then access to professional mental health services. So I would say this is huge because the majority of young people, they get connected with mental health services in the school system. So whether that's a school guidance counselor or a lot of schools, I know this is a private school, but a lot of public schools have access to mental health therapists in addition to their school guidance counselors. So just being mindful, whatever your school support system is that's pouring into their mental health, just making sure they know how to access it. If you don't have it, then finding ways to also include that so that a young person knows that they can go and get this type of help if they need it. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So I do want to move into just some suicide prevention awareness, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is really preventing suicide. I do believe that suicide is preventable. And so one of the reasons when I talked about signs and symptoms, a lot of times there are signs present, but just the people in that person's life didn't know what those signs were. They didn't know, they didn't recognize them. If they did recognize them, they didn't know what to do with them. And so it's really important that in our communities that we do things to raise awareness, to provide education and training, so that if I encounter a young person who's exhibiting some signs and symptoms, I kind of see it for what it is. And then I also have the tools and resources in my tool belt to get them access to help. So just some information to kind of share with you all so that you can kind of, if you're not in the world of mental health, you may not know this information, so I do always try to share at least a little bit of the data. So in the United States, suicide is currently the 11th leading cause of death based on the current information that we have. When we're talking about young people, it's the second leading cause of death for individuals ages 10 to 14. It's the second leading cause of death in the United States. Only thing that beats it is accidental injury, or just injury in general, which sometimes some of that data can be skewed. You never know if an injury was intentional or unintentional sometimes. So just being mindful that there could be more than what this data is collecting. For individuals 25 to 34, it's also the second leading cause of death. And then for individuals 15 to 24, so I'm mainly highlighting the young people. For 15 to 24, it's the third leading cause of death. And so when I make a statement like suicide is preventable, there's a whole lot of individuals that we could have saved if a lot more people were aware of the signs and symptoms, if they had access to the different services that could help them with their mental health, if we had environments that decrease the stigma around mental health. So there's a lot of things that we as a community can do to really help these numbers come down. One of the things that NAMI noticed is that 46% of individuals who did die by suicide had a diagnosable mental health condition at the time of their death. So we do know that mental health and suicide can go hand in hand. Now, not everyone who dies by suicide has a mental health condition. There is a percentage that don't. But just recognizing how mental health can impact us in that way. 90% of the individuals who die by suicide, their family or their friends said, well, maybe they were experiencing it and I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back on it now, I've been more informed than, oh, I did see some signs and symptoms there. And so our hope is to inform people so that they're not looking back, that they have this information in advance. In Tennessee, so that was kind of the umbrella of US. So let's break it down to Tennessee. So in Tennessee, it was the 12th leading cause of death in Tennessee. It was the 3rd leading cause of death for young people 10 all the way up to age 24. So it really is impacting us here in Tennessee. And I always put on here information about firearms. And the reason I put on there is because access to means, so when I say access to means, that is something that someone would use to harm themselves. So that could be a firearm, that could be manual strangulation, that could be medications and things like that. And so my job as a mental health professional is to always make sure that I am reducing someone's access to means. And so that means when they're vulnerable, having that conversation with them about making sure that they're safer now, making sure that we reduce their access to firearms, that we reduce their access to even over-the-counter medicines. And so, and the reason why we talk about that is you can see that their firearms accounted for 67% of suicide-related deaths. And I own a firearm, so I'm not here to say firearms are bad because, you know, I have a firearm. We're in an area where there's a lot of hunters. And so it's just recognizing when someone's at a place of vulnerability that maybe it's not the best time for them to have access to that and whatever we can do to help them during that moment. There are some populations with greater risk. So the only one I want to highlight, because I do feel that we are in a rural area, is that individuals living in rural areas typically died by suicide at a rate 1.4 times higher than metro areas. So just recognize, and that could be due to many, many different factors. Some of the factors could be due to lack of access to care. In rural areas, there's a lot less providers available, a lot less resources available. Sometimes you don't even have public transportation to get to those resources. So just being mindful of how us being in a rural area could already be impacting individuals' access to mental health care treatment in a negative way. So breaking it down to even Robertson County, bringing it home a little bit. I will say this is a little bit older data because they've actually stopped releasing this data, so I can't get access to any more current numbers. But in 2020, Robertson County did lose 15 individuals to suicide. And so it's really important, and I put up the different counties there just for comparison. I know that we're pretty close to Sumner County. In that same year, Sumner County lost 31 individuals to suicide. And so just being mindful of how suicide really does impact everyone. Either we've lost a loved one or we ourselves are experiencing thoughts of suicide. And so just being mindful that it is a topic that we don't need to be scared to talk about. Because if we're scared to talk about it, then someone who's experiencing those symptoms might be afraid to come to us and share with us what they're experiencing. So anything you could do to help engage them in that conversation. So like I said, so these are some signs that you can kind of look for. So it is hard sometimes to see when someone is experiencing emotional pain. And so these are just some examples of things that you can look for. I will say there's a lot of trainings, I'll talk about that on another side, but there's a lot of trainings that can fully equip you to recognize signs and symptoms, and even some trainings that will help you engage and provide like temporary intervention until you can get that person to the professional help. But these are just a few of the warning signs. And this is some of the risk factors that I didn't talk about, but some of them are if someone's having relationship problems. So a lot of your young people are starting to explore different relationships, and not everyone the first person that you're with is not always going to be the person that you're with for the rest of your life. And so because their brains are not fully developed, they can't always problem solve and see that that's not, that sometimes they might think that that's the end of the world when they've lost that relationship. And so it's really important to help a young person when they're experiencing something like that, to help them know that their supports are available, and if they need to talk, that you're someone that they can talk to. Some other examples that are up here of risk factors: if you've lost a family member, if you have a chronic illness, that can be something that is a risk factor. and bullying. I don't know if that's something that is happening in your all schools. Is that some, as a teacher, is that something that you see very often?
I mean, I would say there's a little bit of it. I mean, it can be addressed in a little bit different way, I think, here, but yeah.
Yeah, I will say that that's something that a lot of young people are experiencing. And like, even when I was young, I don't think social media came around until we were in college. And yeah, and so you can imagine our young people used to, you could protect someone like when they're away from school. If the bullying is happening at school, you didn't really have to worry about it when they were at home. But now, because of social media, which can be good or bad, just being cognizant of the fact that even when they're away from whatever environment, that the physical bullying is happening and the emotional bullying could still be taking place if they are active on like social media sites and things like that. So just being mindful of how that can positively or negatively impact a young person. And then some protective factors. So you guys are protective factors. You are caring adults in young people's lives, and like research shows that having one caring adult in a young person's life can really make a difference. So the fact that you are here wanting to learn more about mental health, I mean, that shows that you are a caring adult in someone's life. And so just having that connectedness with them, with a parent or with someone who's a non-parent, and that's where teachers a lot of times come into play. Especially, I see this a lot in the public school system. I'm not sure about in your all's community, but in the public system, a lot of times there are children there that maybe have they come from broken homes, or they come from maybe homes where they are not told they love you. They're not poured into and encouraged and lifted up. And so when they come to school, that teacher there becomes that caregiver, becomes that trusted adult in their life, whether it's a coach. Sometimes it could be a coach as well. And so just being mindful that even if they're not like your biological or under your care as a caregiver, that you can still make a tremendous impact in the life of a young person just by being a caring adult in their life and checking in on them. Kids overall are very resilient though. I know I talked about some mental health challenges and suicide, but they're really resilient. And so if we can get them help early on, they can really do a lot to overcome and still thrive with regardless of whatever mental health challenge they might experience. So, and recovery is possible. Just because someone has a diagnosis of a mental health disorder doesn't mean that they're gonna live with that for their whole life. It could be a temporary thing or a seasonal thing. So just being mindful of that recovery is possible. And so anything that you can do to help young people encourage that resiliency in them is huge. School safety is another one, especially with access to social media and just increase of crimes that are occurring in our school system. Even children who maybe have never encountered any type of trauma or violent related trauma may not always feel safe in their school. And so just recognizing that could be a risk factor to a young person, and then helping them talk about it, helping them communicate on what they're experiencing, and also just sharing with them, hey, this is what we're doing to keep you safe. This is what we're doing to help you, just to encourage that resiliency in them. So like recovery is possible, but it does take a lot of pieces, a lot of people working together to help them feel better. So I do list on here just several different suicide prevention resources. I'm just gonna scroll through them just to get to the trainings. But there are free trainings that you all can access to help further increase your knowledge, give you more tools in your tool belt. And I'm a volunteer with an organization called Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network. So if you ever want these trainings, we can deliver them to your schools, to your parent groups for free. Depending on the training that you get. Some of them are as small as 1 hour. Some of them are as long as 16.5 hours of curriculum with an hour break for lunch. So it ends up being an 8-hour day. So depending on the level of training that you want, some of them are even 2 days. So ASSIST is a 2-day training, but it gets really into the intervention skills. So just being mindful that you guys can get these trainings for free. You can reach out to me, or you can contact Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network directly. But these are things that are free and can equip you and give you skills and things that maybe you did not have previously. I also wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of some mental health resources in Robertson County. I know this is really small, but I can send it to someone if they want to have access to these resources. But these are some of the ones I'm aware of in our community. And then I also put some crisis information on here as well. So substance use is something that is actually increasing in our young people. And so the Tennessee Red Line, the one at the very bottom of that, just like there's a mental health crisis line, 988, you can call Tennessee Red Line if you're ever experiencing someone that has alcohol or drug-related crises, and maybe they're wanting to get into help and they need access to treatment. You can call that number 24/7 as well. And I think it took a little bit. Well, I'll go back to that. So this is what we see a lot. So a lot of times individuals, when you ask someone how they're feeling, what's their response?
Fine.
I'm fine, but really they're not. Really, there's a whole lot of other things going inside that they just either for some reason or another are not communicating. It could be fear of stigma, it could be maybe that you're just not that trusted person in their life and they need to get connected to a different trusted person, and that's okay. So just being mindful when we ask someone to really be prepared for the answer if they tell you something other than fine. Be prepared to engage them in conversation if they tell you something other than fine. I mean, it's great if they're fine. But I don't know how many times I've ever been asked, how am I? And the true answer was fine. It usually wasn't. Usually something else was going on and it would have been helpful to talk to somebody about. So just being mindful of that when we ask our kids, how you doing? Have fun. You know, ask more questions, get to see if you can get them talking a little bit more. And I apologize, I think somehow in the transition some slides got switched around, but this is my contact information. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask, you can either email me. Also, I'm available here too, like if you have any questions that you want to ask tonight. So
I was gonna ask you, like, what are good questions to ask? I feel like we ask a lot of rhetorical stuff, like, how are you? And we ask our kids, how was your day? And that's it. It's like these rhetorical questions. So are there like good questions that are just like good to start engagement that are different than the norm?
Yes, so a lot of times what I encourage people to do something is similar to saying, I noticed something, whatever that is. And so when you say, I noticed this, it helps not put, like you're not attacking the young person. Like, you know, I've noticed you're not sleeping as well. Is there anything I can do to help you with your sleep? So the way you frame the question to the young person can really encourage or discourage their willingness to open up to you. So if you ask them a question like, you're all right, aren't you? Like if I ask it like that, they're not gonna wanna say, oh no, I'm not okay. But if I ask it in a caring way, hey, I've noticed that maybe you when you come to school that maybe you haven't been connecting with your friends as usual. Is there anything you wanna talk about? I just want you to know I'm here for you. So how you ask it can make a big difference in terms of whether or not they're gonna open up to you and kind of tell you what they're really feeling.
That's awesome.
Another thing I encourage is how many of you guys, when you talk to, it's just normal, when we talk to a young person and they tell us their problem, we immediately want to go into fix-it mode. We immediately want to solve the problem for them. We want to take care of it. We want to be their superhero in that moment. But a lot of times they don't need us to fix their problems. They just need us to share their problems. And they just need a safe place where they can, you know, just kind of open up about everything that they're experiencing and thinking and with that safe person and not really have someone solve it, but just be a trusted person in their life for them to share it with. Any other questions? Well, I'll hang out, so if y'all do have any, I'll hang out if you have anything individually you want to ask, but thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And if you guys do want any of those free trainings, please holler, especially if it could help your school, if it could help your churches or anything like that. We have one that's being offered in Springfield in a week, actually. I think it has a couple of slots left open, so if you want to attend that one too, feel free to get you that information so somebody can sign up.
So have you ever done in-services like for teachers?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've done several. So some of the things, because of the time frames on some of them, it just depends on how much the faculty and the administration are able to give.
Okay.
But one of the ones that typically works really well for short periods of time is called Question, Persuade, Respond. And so that is QPR, I do it for short. But that is one that can be delivered in like either an hour or a 2-hour increment. And it really gets down to asking the question and then what you do if someone tells you yes, they have these thoughts of suicide.
That'd be a good one because I think.
So that one's a really good one. I really enjoy the mental health first aid curriculums. They are a full business day, which is very difficult for working people to get to. But I do enjoy the mental health first aid because it really does go into mental health challenges a little bit more, as well as it gives you scenarios that you can kind of work through and problem solve as a team to kind of get other people's input as well. So I really enjoy the mental health first aid curriculums. Cool.
Thank you very much.